Hello, Utility Fleet World. It's another edition of Under the UFP Hood. It's Kurt Moreland, Associate Publisher of Utility Fleet Professional, and we're headed into December and towards the holidays. And if you've been following this podcast, or you can go back and listen to some of our previous episodes, you'll know that we've been covering what's new in tech and how tech can help fleet managers. So we've covered AI, we've covered training, we've covered a little bit on how to crunch the numbers, and there are services out there that can help you quite a bit with benchmarking and other things. And a press release came across my desk from Fleetio, and it caught my attention, and I'd like to introduce Zach Searcy, who is the Fleet Content Manager, Senior Fleet Content Manager for Fleetio, to shed a little bit more light on how their company and technology can help all of us fleet managers out. Welcome, Zach.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I actually, before this, spent a few years managing the social media accounts for Altec. So I have a strange, unique connection to this industry, but also just a deep appreciation for this space, and especially the frontline workers who are serving their community in this way.
Sounds like you're overqualified.
That's what I keep telling people.
Yeah, that's a great connection to have, and Altec is one of our great advertisers as well. So thanks for bringing that up. You know, I go to the trade shows. You guys are very involved in a lot of trade shows, and I've always maybe this is kind of a stereotype of thinking of your company and your services more in automotive fleets, but you do a lot for a medium duty trucks as well, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about this, and I really think that the utility space probably benefits the most from aggressive maintenance compliance. I think when you think about the primary role of a fleet manager being keeping their team safe, the best way to do that is by being up to date on maintenance. And I think for utilities specifically, like if they're getting called up to respond to a storm or another natural disaster, they're hundreds of miles away from their home base with limited communication. And the best thing that you can do as a fleet manager is make sure that their maintenance is up to date, so that when you send them out, they're operating in a vehicle that is safe and going to make sure that they get home.
Yeah, and when I talk to our readers, that's definitely a pain point. So walk us through how your software and services help manage the shop maintenance process, especially since there's been so many challenges with supply chain.
Yeah. So a lot of what we do is really try to surface information for fleet managers easily. So what you do is you set up your customized dashboard, and from there you can see every single vehicle that is due soon for service, overdue for service, and then you can also see which parts are associated with what service they're needing, so you can look at your parts inventory. We allow fleets to track their parts inventory within the platform itself as an add-on feature. And so with that, what they're able to do is see if they've got the parts needed for service that's coming up, and make sure that the vehicles that do come into the shop are, for one, planned, because maintenance is the best way to make sure that all your downtime is planned downtime rather than unscheduled. But then also that you have a plan to keep it in the shop for the least amount of time as possible. And so our goal for you as a fleet manager is that you bring them in and you're able to get them out in a matter of hours instead of days. And we know that data visibility and not being able to see that you're missing a part or something like that is a quick way to keep a vehicle in the shop for longer than it should be.
Let's go back to the supply chain, which has been a big challenge in the last couple of years. And I believe there's still, let's call it a hangover going on.
Yeah.
Tell us how you guys must have been busy and fielding some calls during this time for what you guys bring to the table.
Yeah, I think it's one of those that I don't want to say that it was advantageous for us, but I think that now more than ever, being able to see the status of your entire fleet operation from a single location is more important than we had seen before supply chain issues had surfaced. And really that's because your teams are more spread out now. There are some companies that have gone to a remote model, and so you've got team members logging in from different places, and you lose that communication that you have just by being in person in a single spot. And so having a platform like ours that allows you to monitor the entire fleet operation from a single location just yeah, we've seen that a lot of people have not just seen it as a nice to have at this point, but something that they really need to be able to run their fleet efficiently.
So if, let's say, the warehouse or shop maintenance is getting low on a certain type of spark plug, does your software send an alert, or how do we know what to do?
Yeah. So what Fleetio does is allows people to set certain thresholds based on each part as to, okay, so let's say spark plugs. You want a lot of spark plugs in stock. And so say once you get to 50, like it can even be a generous number. Once you get to 50 left in stock, it's like, okay, send me an alert so I know that we need to go ahead and start ordering more parts in order to get those in. And so in the case of supply chain issues, where if it's a part that you know it's going to be difficult to get, you can set an even higher threshold so that you're thinking 6, 9, 12 months in advance. Or if it's something as simple as an oil filter where you're just like, okay, every month we need to order this amount, but let me know if we start getting below this number. We can immediately and automatically send out an alert so fleet managers can be on top of it and avoid that terrible feeling when you go to the shelf and the part's not there.
Ooh, yeah, that would be bad. And then I assume that you also help with preventative maintenance too. Are there sensors on the truck that keep the shop and procurement up to date?
Yeah. So preventative maintenance is, I don't want to say our bread and butter because I just got off Thanksgiving and my stomach is still currently full, but it's our bread and butter. It's what we do best. And so in order to notify people when they've got a mileage-based service due, we actually partner with many of the popular telematics devices in the industry. And so say somebody's got like a Geotab or a Samsara device on their truck. What we can do is automatically pull in odometer readings and even fault codes from those vehicles and notify fleet managers based on that. So if you see, I want a vehicle to have an oil change and I want you to notify me when it's 500 miles away, then we can send that to you so you can start planning out your service in advance using that.
That sounds really good. And you are working with some utilities. I think I saw Oklahoma Co-op.
Yeah. We've got a few around, and Oklahoma Co-op's a fun one. I know that in talking with them before Fleetio, they were really relying on spreadsheets in order to keep track of their inventory, which I imagine there are quite a few fleet managers in that situation. And I love a good spreadsheet. You'll have to pry them from me because I'm not going to give them up willingly. But as we know, a spreadsheet is more of a reactive way to manage your fleet. It's only as good as the information that you put into it. And it's also only as good as how often you're putting that information into it. And so what Oklahoma Co-op has done is they've used Fleetio to receive pre-trip inspections from their drivers immediately. And so if their driver fails an item in that pre-trip inspection, they're able to say, oh, this vehicle has something that we wouldn't have noticed until we brought it into the shop a month from now. And so they can go ahead and plan around that. And they're really using Fleetio to get immediate information from the frontline users of their fleet vehicles, which is the best way to see what's going on.
Yeah, so I imagine that you've helped increase productivity.
Yeah. We've increased productivity, but it's also just allowing them to get to issues before they turn into something bigger. I think that even a small thing can snowball into something much larger. And when we're trying to keep vehicles on the road, I mean, for all of these workers, their vehicle is the greatest tool that they use to do their job. This is not an industry where your vehicle is a mode of transportation. It's what you're using to do your job. And so keeping it running is essential.
Yeah, it sure is. And I appreciate you mentioning that because we can all relate to that. And then also, when I was reviewing this press release that came across my desk, you guys have been working with Ashland in Australia, but I have a niece who lives in Australia, and that's a very rugged area. And there, as she tells me, there's a lot of things there that can kill you. So that's quite a testimony.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't protect you from the wildlife in Australia. That's not a feature that we've rolled out yet. But yeah, I've had a great conversation with Brian, the fleet manager down at Ashland, Australia, and he was using Fleetio in an interesting way because what they've done recently is they noticed that once they incorporated Fleetio, they had a bunch of trucks that were just sitting in a lot during the off season. And what they've done is they've used Fleetio to balance utilization across their entire fleet. So an example to bring it to the States, like I'm here in the South, and in the South, our storm season runs from April to November. And so you're going to need trucks in the Southeastern region for that stretch of time. But we know that once you get to November, winter storms start becoming a thing. And so rather than having those Southern trucks camp out in Alabama with our mild winters, you can go ahead and plan to send them up north and make sure that your assets are balanced across your entire organization.
Yeah, that's so true. And I'm going to put in a plug that our Incident Prevention Utility Safety Conference is going to be in Charleston,
Okay.
South Carolina, the
Beautiful town.
in April. And yeah, that's one of the things that's right in the middle of the hurricane territory.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, not for the conference, but just for people who want to talk to people who have to deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. And yeah, I think that like, even if you're a regional fleet, knowing that something that I love about this industry is that when a storm happens, you don't just focus on the region that you are serving. You'll send your team to other places all across the states and across the world as needed. And so I think like making those connections early and knowing this might be a down season for us, but this person that I met over here might be needing support. You can go ahead and start thinking about that after making those connections.
Yeah, you may have already covered this, but one of the things I found on your website is it says Fleetio helps connect the dots. Explain that to me. What do you guys mean by that?
Yeah, I think that it's that what I said earlier, where it's communication gaps have only gotten bigger since we've gone into this new remote world. And what Fleetio does is help connect all of those dots. And so in the example that I shared earlier, let's say that your driver is doing their pre-trip inspection and fails a tire for its tire pressure reading multiple days in a row. They keep topping the tire off, but the tire pressure keeps dropping. That immediately goes to a fleet manager. They're going to say, oh, clearly this tire has some sort of leak or some sort of problem in it, and can immediately put a plan in place to bring it into the shop. Technician has the entire service history of that vehicle ready, and you can immediately, I don't know, I think the whole thing that we really do is just speed up the workflow and reduce the amount of downtime in between processes. And then the connecting the dots is the communication that happens automatically and instantly based on what people are doing within the platform.
And so I imagine you guys supply an easy to read dashboard.
Oh, it's I'm biased, but it's so easy to read. I read it every morning just for fun. It's basically my morning news.
That's pretty. And so instead of reading the morning paper, you read that.
Yeah. We uninstalled all the social media apps and I just open up Fleetio each morning. I don't even have any vehicles in there.
You are a dedicated man. I give you that.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you the question, like what separates Fleetio from other software platforms?
Yeah, I think there are a few different things, and we've already touched on some of them, but from the start, like this is an industry that has been around for a while, and there are a lot of legacy platforms out there. And so I think something that you'll see in Fleetio that separates us instantly is the dashboard is modern and easy to understand. So when you bring on a new team member, they're not having to figure out how to operate some software that was designed in 2001, like we're past Y2K and it's time to update that interface. But then the other thing that we've seen is just that data and vehicle visibility, being able to connect your telematics devices, your fuel cards into Fleetio to get that data visibility instantly and connect those different dots. And then also what we've seen is people really benefiting from our location-specific reporting. And so if you're an Asplund that has branches all over the United States, being able to say, what is our benchmark across all our locations and which ones are under or overperforming compared to that benchmark to make just a change. And I think that's our ultimate thing, is just providing fleet managers not with just like a system to track their information, but also to really improve their fleet operations. There's so many opportunities to make your fleet better.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about fleet cards, gas cards on the podcast. Can you shed a little bit more light on that? Like how you work to bring those all together? Do you supply your own cards or recommended ones, or you just kind of your software integrates all of them?
Yeah, similar to the way that we work with telematics and GPS devices, is we've got a lot of partners in the industry, and really, like I love fuel cards. I think there's so much information that you can gather from stuff in there. I think that when you look at the data specifically and you see, oh, this vehicle that is the same year make model as this vehicle is running much less efficient than this vehicle, then you can say, okay, it's either time to get rid of that vehicle, or there's something wrong with it, or it's a driver who's driving recklessly. So like that's one example of how you can look at your fuel data to make a change in your fleet. Other things that we've seen is as much as I hate to see it, like fuel theft is a problem when you have fuel cards. And so being able to track the usage of the fuel cards, and something that we do is for each fill up, we also bring in a GPS location of where that happened. And so you can make sure that the GPS lines up with the gas station that they said that they filled it up at. And so little things like that, fuel is, it's a set expense, and it feels like you often don't have a lot of control there. But by actually tracking that data, there is a little bit that you can do to fight the just wild fuel costs that we see.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about the fuel theft.
Yeah.
And with the price of fuel as high as it is, yeah, that could be an issue.
Yeah, for sure.
So as people who follow the podcast know, I love to travel. I love a good celebrity encounter story. So let's take a little break and can you share a celebrity encounter story with us?
Yeah, for some reason, the first thing that came to mind. So, one of my like fun facts in life is that Nicholas Sparks, the guy who wrote The Notebook, it's a movie that my wife loves. But the person who wrote that book actually taught me how to hold a baby, which is like a strange sentence to say. But before this, I was working for a bookstore, and he came to do a book signing at that bookstore. And a lady walked up with her child in one arm and then a stack of books in the other. And she looked like she was going to drop both. And so I committed to saving the child in that scenario. But Nicholas Sparks told me that I clearly didn't know how to hold a baby, which fair. Like I was 22 at the time and had not had a lot of chances to hold babies. And so promptly like made fun of me, showed me how to properly hold a baby. And I could tell you like every woman in that line who was waiting to get their book signed, like suddenly fell more in love with him and less in love with me. So yeah, that's my story.
Support the neck.
I know. Yeah. Apparently it's not like football style, which is what I was going for.
Well, that's a great story. I appreciate you sharing that one with with us.
It's a vulnerable thing to share, but I'm happy to share it with you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Especially before Christmas time.
Right. Yeah.
Always good to add a little bit on baby safety, because the families are going to be getting together. So
yeah. Yeah. And look, yeah, our arms are going to be full, and it's helpful that I now know how to lessen the burden.
I'm glad you decided to save the baby and not the book.
Yeah. Could you imagine that story if I would have reached for the books instead? That'd be a much different celebrity encounter.
Oh, that's a good lead into all the children who will be meeting with Santa in the next month. And those are always great visuals as well. So
yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. So we're going to get back to business a little bit, and then tell us how Fleetio helps with outsourcing and third party. So I got to mention that in the surveys we've done, the majority of the work is done in-house with the shop maintenance departments, but there's always some that are, trying the local tire dealer or the local dealership to take a little bit off their plate. How do you guys work with all that?
Yeah. So I think that for what you're saying, like we work with a ton of fleets who go with the mixed maintenance approach, and they say, we're going to handle things that we can do in 4 to 6 hours and then get it back out on the road. And then anything greater than that, we're going to outsource to a shop. And so we work with a lot of fleets who do that. And that's a pretty seamless way to work within Fleetio. I also think when it comes to the utility space, like if a vehicle breaks down and it's hundreds of miles away from your shop, what do you do in that scenario? And I think that's where our maintenance shop network really comes into play. And so built into Fleetio, we have a maintenance shop network. It's tens of thousands of shops, both national brands and mom and pop shops. And so you can kind of set your preferences and easily add people to the network based on your preferences that are all accessible from our mobile app. And so if your driver breaks down and they're in the middle of, I was going to try to name like a boring state, but I don't want to throw any shade at any states. So instead, we'll just say they break down in the middle of nowhere.
How about, well, I'll throw in Salem, Illinois. That's where I
Okay.
broke down when I was in college.
You were so quick with it too. You were just waiting for a chance to talk about Salem, Illinois.
Well, yeah, and ironically, Salem, of course. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. So let's say your driver breaks down in Salem, Illinois. Well, you can tell them, go ahead and open up their app and look for the closest shop near you. And they can immediately go to that shop, show them the app, and the shop can perform service. You would, as a fleet manager, approve all service from your computer. And it just simplifies that whole process. You don't have to worry about like, where are we going to tow them to? What are we going to do? How do we get this driver back on the road? It really helps that process. And where that really benefits in terms of using it in Fleetio rather than them just finding a shop on Google is that when you perform that service with a Fleetio certified shop, then all of that service history also gets added to the vehicle. So you as a fleet manager can see all the service performed on the vehicle, regardless of whether your team did it or if you had another shop, a maintenance shop, do that for you.
Yeah, and you mentioned hurricanes and hurricane season. What you're talking about sounds like you guys would really help out during natural disasters because you have utilities from all over the country that come to that area,
Yeah.
and they all have to be on the same page. Um, do, does your software help with that coordinating?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's a great example of how this works. I was actually talking to a fleet manager. He's from up in the Iowa area recently. And what he was telling me was we were getting ready for the big hurricane that recently hit Florida, one of the two. And what he did is he had pulled up Fleetio on his phone and he was tracking. They have a full mobile RV with like technicians in it that they send to the storm site. And so they send their technicians in addition to their drivers, but he's able to track the status of service and breakdowns and all of that from his desk as well. And so I think like creating that sense of communication while your team's deployed, we've seen a lot of benefit for utility fleets. But then also, yeah, if you don't have a full RV to send along, which most people I assume probably don't, then you can also find local shops and communicate with them and let them know, hey, we've got this vehicle coming on the way. Can you make sure that any repairs are sent to me and I can approve them quickly?
Okay, and there's been a lot of mergers in the industry, both with utilities and on the vendor side.
Yeah.
Does your Fleetio software help with that at all?
It does. Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's two different ways to look at it. I mean, if you're the fleet that's being acquired, I've heard of many people using Fleetio as kind of like a Carfax of sense, like if you're buying a car, you want to see the full service history. If you open up that glove box and see a binder full of records, you're like, that's a good thing. This is a car that I want. Similarly, if your fleet has all of your service records stored digitally, you can instantly transfer that over. And then the people who are acquiring your fleet have access to all that information and know the full history of your vehicles. And then on the other side, like you're able to standardize your process for bringing fleets in. And so Asplund was a great example of this. They were going through a few acquisitions when we were talking to them, and you really create a standard process for tracking maintenance. And so when you add these fleets in, you can say, hey, this is our way of doing things. But then also like it allows you to effectively benchmark those new branches that were merged in with your existing ones. And you can see, are they over or underperforming? How do we use this to make sure that all our fleets are operating at the best capacity possible?
Yeah, and then is that historical data, which can be predictive insight, or is that something else?
Yeah, historical data. It's any service that you perform using Fleetio stays with that vehicle in Fleetio for the life of your account. And so that's a thing that you can go back and say, since we acquired this vehicle, this is everything that we've done to it. And yeah, we love that feature.
Yeah, at the conferences that I've been to, I also hear, one of the main pain points too is liability. So if you, as you mentioned, if you've got a good history that the vehicle was maintained, and then, there's some kind of a court case,
Yeah.
I would imagine that you have your ducks in a row.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar to how you would have an in-cab dash, like it's for the safety of your team and your fleet. And so you can show like that we were doing everything we could to prevent it. I think that preventive maintenance is absolutely a way to show your commitment to your team's safety and things like that. So yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah, so a couple other questions. I mean, if you look into the crystal ball for supply chain, since you're there in the front lines, What are you seeing? What are you feeling? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Is it about the same?
Yeah, I feel like this year we saw a lot of things get better, and I think we'll kind of continue to see that trend, barring some sort of large shift in processes. I know that anytime you have a new administration coming in, you can expect some sort of change, and so I think that we're monitoring that to see if there is what kind of change, whether positive, negative, or neutral. I think that change is inevitable. So I don't know. I feel like we're in a good place, and I feel like things are getting better. But obviously, we're due for some change on January 20th, and so we'll kind of see what impact that has on the global supply chain.
Yeah, very, very good, timely discussion. So you've talked about a couple of the customers that you've helped. I think I also saw something on your website that you've worked with Scoby Powerline. Um, Tell us a little bit about that and how you helped them.
Yeah. I love the team up at Scoby. We visited them, I guess it's been a couple years now. And Scoby is a smaller operation north of Kansas City. And Lisa, who was the person who was tasked with managing all of their fleet information, had to enter all of that data in manually. And so inspections, work orders, registrations, people's birthdays, like that was the thing that she wanted to make sure she kept track of. She was manually entering that into spreadsheets and things like that in order to track those. And she even told me, she was like, maintenance is not my background. Like I know what it looks like to have a well-maintained vehicle, but I don't have the eye to be able to track things as they happen and to make those connections that my technicians would. And so what she's done is she set up an automated system where when their drivers perform a pre-trip inspection, that triggers a work order, which then notifies their technician, which kicks off the service task. And all that works together in order to resolve those issues quicker and get their vehicles back on the road. When I was talking to Lisa, she told me, she was like, what we were doing is not sustainable. It's just too much for one person to be managing. And when you have that much potential for human error, you allow things to fall through the cracks, which could be detrimental. And so she's really been able to focus on her other task and just trust that all the things from fleet are falling into place.
Yeah, I'm very proud of our industry as we've always been, uh, very eager to adapt new technology.
Yeah.
Everybody's seems to be on the same page with GPS, and just wondering if you to get a little bit of a feel out there, how many people are still using paper or spreadsheets, and how many are using software? Is it like 50-50, do you think, or what?
I would say that it's probably closer to 50-50 these days. I think that we've seen, especially in the last 4 years or so, a transition from the more manual processes that I think before the pandemic even, we were probably closer to like 70% using spreadsheets and paper and 30% using software. And so we're seeing that transition happen. But I think that there's still a lot of opportunity there. And yeah, I think what I love about my conversation with Lisa is that like technology is not something that's limited to the large operations. Like that's not something that only somebody with a national operation can employ and find benefit in. Like I think regardless of your fleet size, modern technology was created to help you do your job better. And I think that their story is a great example of how a fleet from 15 vehicles all the way up to 7,000, like you can benefit from these softwares in order to do your job better and to make sure that your team's safe.
Looking down the road and in the crystal ball, do you see anything in the future that's coming up on the horizon that we should be aware of? Any technology or AI?
Yeah, I think you touched on it. And I think like the future of AI and fleet is so much more interesting than like the chat GPTs of the world. Like I think chat GPT is cool, but that's just creating a bunch of words quickly. I think where fleet will really benefit from AI is the predictive analytics. And so it's that you take service histories for thousands of vehicles of the same year, make, model, and then look at that information and say, oh, we noticed that all of these vehicles, the alternator fails around 125,000 miles. So as a fleet manager, you then don't have to wait until it fails. You can say, okay, well then at 115, we're going to go ahead and replace it. We might lose some of the existing life of that alternator, but I don't have to worry about towing the vehicle in. I don't have to worry about like the cost of expedited service. Like everything can be planned accordingly. And so I think for the fleet industry specifically, that's where this artificial intelligence is going to get really interesting, is looking at a batch of data and then using that to make assumptions about what could be happening in your fleet in the near future.
That's an amazing application. Thank you
Yeah.
for that insight. So, Zach, tell everybody how they can find out more about Fleetio. I'm sure you guys are on YouTube. I think you even can register for a demonstration.
Yeah. We're in so many places. YouTube is a great place to find us. You can also go to our website. It's fleetio.com. That's fleetio.com, because I sometimes say it quickly and my Southern accent covers up how you actually spell it out. But we would love to show you our software. And I think that what I've been telling people is we're going into a new year. It's a great time to look at your fleet as a whole and say what's working for us, what's not working for us, and really just see where are the opportunities. If we have a problem in our fleet, what's going to be the tech solution that helps us solve that problem? If maintenance and keeping track of maintenance is your problem, selfishly, we'd love to help you. But I think that there are too many exciting technologies in the world right now for you to not have just an impressive tech stack in order to help you manage your fleet effectively.
Well, I'm really proud of this podcast series that we've done.
Yeah.
And hopefully the fleet managers of the future will look back at this one day and hear our discussions. And Zach, just having you on for this one, it's kind of like putting the bow on the present. We'll tie
That's right. Yeah.
How about that? In the
So topical. So topical. I love it.
You put the bow on it. So again, I want to thank Zach Searcy, who is the Senior Marketing Fleet Content Manager for Fleetio. If you have any questions, reach out to them. And I just want to remind everybody out there to roll safe, especially over the holidays.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Utility Business Media and its employees. It is strongly recommended that you discuss any actions or policy changes with your company management prior to implementation.